and you walk into your brand new classroom that is sitting there empty, and you think, now what? Today, we are going to really dive into that idea of classroom management. We talked about that being a challenge, but also allowing to have so many positives in a student and teacher experience. So whether you are in the process of becoming a teacher, a brand new teacher, or a teacher that's been in the classroom for a while and just want some new tips and tricks on classroom management and how to establish your classroom, join me as we continue this path to the classroom. So today, we are going to take the journey as a brand new teacher and setting up your classroom. So you want to be a teacher and you just got offered your first job and you walk into your brand new classroom that is sitting there empty and you think, now what? Well, these tips and tricks will help you to start the process of establishing the culture and the classroom management in your future classroom. First and foremost, when you are walking into the classroom, remember, this is your home away from home. It is where your students and you will experience learning together, feeling safe, trusting one another in one environment. So how you set up your classroom really allows that to come to life. So I want to start with your furniture, because that is probably the very first thing that you are going to work through and identify how to set up your classroom. So whether you are walking into tables or desks, you have two decisions to make. Are you thinking that your classroom is going to be a collaborative, peer learning environment or a more traditional environment? There is research to support both sides. A lot of that will depend on the type of school setting that you are in. But for me, I really support that peer learning environment. I am an early childhood teacher through and through. I taught K-3 for years and years. So for me, that peer learning and having those groups within my classroom was so important to me. So if you have desks or you have tables, two things need to come into mind when you're deciding how to set those up. First, is there space for you to walk around, monitor the classroom, and the students can walk around, roam around, and feel safe? So that needs to come into play. So you need to make sure that there is space in between where those tables and or desks are set up. The second thing is making sure that none of your students' backs are to the area that you will most often teach. The minute you set up groups where desks or students' backs are to you at the front of the classroom, wherever that is established, you are losing that connection to learning. So do what you can to set up tables and or desks where the students are at the side and able to look at you without having to turn their whole bodies. If you decide to go with the more traditional classroom environment, that is going to be your standard rows. Oftentimes you have to have desks for that. So sometimes older grade levels, 4th, 5th, and beyond, that is the better setup for you, just to ensure that that learning experience is positive for all of your students. So again, make sure that those rows and or U-shaped type environment is facing the area that you are going to most often be teaching in. So now that we have looked at our desks and our tables, the next big part of furniture is those different math manipulative areas. If you are teaching early childhood and you are going to have more of a pretend play area or blocks, you're going to set up a reading corner. These are the next layers to the furniture that you have in your classroom. And I want to offer one big tip for those types of corners that you might set up in your classroom. Your reading corner. Never, ever, ever place your reading corner right next to one of your math manipulatives, blocks, or pretend play areas. Those are what we call high exploration, high activity areas. And when you set something like a reading corner right next to one of those areas, you are instantly asking for your students that are in the reading corner to be distracted and to often be wondering, what is going on in that area? It looks like they're having fun. What am I doing over here? And you're losing that connection to that safe, quiet reading area. So do your best to find an area away from those louder, high active areas to establish something like a reading corner and or a writing corner. The teacher desk is the next big piece of furniture. And oftentimes you do not sit at your teacher desk. So it becomes an area that just gets things piled on, notes from parents or work. And so put it in a corner that you know that you do not need and or you're not going to be going to often. When you are working with students, you are often using a small kidney-shaped or circle table where you're pulling students back. So that covers the big furniture pieces that help you establish your classroom environment. I want to really go into two more large areas when it comes to setting up your classroom. The next thing that I want you to think about, your walls define you. And there are two ways that you can think about your walls. There is research to say, add that color, add that unique sense of who you are as a classroom teacher. Sometimes in a year, you create a theme. You are, the Vought Vultures, or you are something catchy and special to who you are. And you walk into that teaching store and you get to find all these cute crafts and wall hangings that align with that theme. Great. That works for some teachers and for some students. But remember, all of our students are unique. And one thing you want to consider is, am I overstimulating my students? Is when it's too much in the classroom going to prevent them from being focused and being able to take in that learning? The other side of research says, let's create a more neutral classroom environment. Don't do too many vibrant colors, but just stay neutral in the bulletins and the colors that you're using. So as you're deciding, am I going to really represent me and my color and my theme? That is one side to designing your walls in your classroom. And the other side is, I'm going to keep it more neutral because I don't know my students yet. And I want to make sure that I'm not overstimulating some of my students. The next piece, and this is an important piece, visuals. Visuals should be a part of every single classroom environment. We will talk about visuals in almost every single video I will create because they are so important for learning and to make those connections with your students. There are some key visual objects that tend to be in a classroom environment: an alphabet chart or line, a number chart or line. If you're in older grades, it could be a phonics poster that is helping them break down phonics rules. When you are thinking about how to establish or determine where you're going to put some of these visuals, I want you to think about, where is your center learning focus? If it is in the front of the classroom with the whiteboard, then you are going to want to put some of those high frequency posters or visuals in that area. Teaching about numbers, teaching about calendar, teaching about the alphabet, where your visual is in the back of the classroom, is immediately disconnecting your student from what it is that they might see and remember when that visual is in that central location. Make sure that when you determine, okay, this is my area that I am most often going to be teaching from, as you are walking around that front of that classroom, put those visuals in that central location. And then the final tip and trick on the big setup of the classroom is your bulletin boards. Create one bulletin board that becomes the center focus for your student proud work, or wow work, some might call it. Go and get those plastic sheet covers that you can put to protect paper sheets. Create one for each student. You can use a Sharpie to write their name. You can use a mailing label to write their name. And then put that in a location that the student can access. So don't put it up so high that they can't reach it. And then allow your students, whether it's weekly, monthly, to determine what piece of wow work is going to go in that sheet protector. Sometimes you might pick the wow work and sometimes your students might pick the wow work, but they get to be the one that walks it over and puts it in that sheet protector. And that will be on display for students throughout the year. And then at the end of the year, you make sure that you keep all of the old wow work in there, place the new one in the front. And at the end of the year, they get to take that sheet protector home. And that is their kind of accomplishment and growth of all the work that they were so proud of during the year. So when we think about the classroom and how to start setting it up, remember we talked about the big ideas of the furniture, the placement of where your kind of center classroom will be. Some of those outside corners, like your reading corner, your play-based learning corner, your math manipulative corner, and then as well as the walls and how the visuals that you use on your walls best support learning for your students. Stick with me as we dive into part 2 and we go a little bit deeper into establishing routines for some of those everyday needs that students have in the classroom. Remember, this is your path to the classroom, and you are going to take these tips and tricks and determine what is best for your classroom. We'll see you soon.